Hello, this is Robert Picardo, the holographic doctor from Star Trek Voyager, and Commander Woolsey from Stargate Atlantis. If I only get in Star Wars someday, I will have made the trifecta. And you're listening to Kneel Before Pod, because you are smart.
Kneel Before Blog presents Kneel Before Pod.
Hello, and welcome to an electrifying edition of Kneel Before Pod, the podcast that hides among the neon signs. Season 1 of the new CWDC superhero show Black Lightning has ended, so it's the duty of Kneel Before Pod to give it some long-form analytical discussion. Back as promised is the same squad that were here for the very first episode. Chris, welcome.
Hello.
And Aaron, you're also here.
Hola.
How do? Made it through the series? Or did
Me,
you?
yes.
Yeah. Chris, you also made it through the series.
I also made it through the series.
And since all the listeners read every single review I write, I also made it through the series.
Thank God for that.
So here we go, yeah.
This is a really poor success criteria, by the way, if that's the measure to start with.
Well, you know, it was teased, and I'm just referencing the thing we teased in the first episode about how, you know, you in particular, Aaron, might abandon it at some point.
Oh, I'd totally forgotten that. Yeah, no, I didn't abandon it. If you had a bet on anything other than the end, you lost.
There we go. So those odds, whatever those odds were, Aaron made it. I don't know. I guess they would win a lot of money because the likelihood would be that you might not make it through.
Well, the odds, if you use DC TV shows, superhero shows as a yardstick, then the odds were really high that I would drop it. I'm not watching any of the other ones anymore, I don't think.
Oh, well. Cool. So, as always, we'll start with our kind of spoiler-free thoughts. Chris, do you want to go first? What did you think of the series as a whole, the first season?
I really enjoyed it, actually. It still suffered from a bit of the sort of mid-season lag that I go on about quite a lot on these podcasts. But do you know what? I think it's a really strong show that sort of stands apart from a lot of the others. I mean, I think the fact that it's set in what appears to be like a really, really real-world setting is pretty impressive, actually. And it makes it stand out quite a lot from the rest.
A real-ish world setting, which will...
Realish, you know. Let's go with the fact that there's superheroes in it and go, okay, let's discount that. But the rest of it seems quite, you know.
Yeah. Aaron, what did you think of the series as a whole?
I probably went slightly the other way in that I did enjoy it, but had more trouble towards the end than I did with the mid-season. But nonetheless, it's that grounding in more real-world issues, trying to make it more realistic as a foundation point that meant that this was a DC show that I did want to come back to.
Cool. My thinking was, I loved it pretty much throughout. There was a couple of episodes and a couple of elements that I thought were a bit undercooked, which we'll definitely get to once we start spoiling everything for everybody. But on the whole, I thought it was really strong. I mean, I'm watching the kind of other shows, the other DC shows, and they're all toiling to an extent because they are 23 bloody episodes, and you know, so you get the odd episode. You get quite a lot of episodes where you're just sitting there and it's like, why is this happening? All they're doing is, you know, running on the spot essentially, and then you get that kind of big blast of plot towards the end. But I think it felt more that the plot that they were developing kind of moved along naturally across the 13 episodes. So it was like they had this 13 episode story. Not that it was perfectly paced, but certainly it was more deliberately paced than the other shows are. And I really liked that, and I think that shorter seasons are definitely a good model for superhero shows because it does let you have that more tight focus, and it lets you move through things a lot quicker and a lot, like I said, a lot more naturally. That was the biggest takeaway I had from that. That is, you know, everything moved on. It felt like every episode was necessary in a way. So yeah, I have nothing else. Unless you guys have anything else, we can spark up the spoiler dynamo.
The spoiler
electricity.
dynamo. I like the spoiler dynamo. Excellent.
It's electricity themed. I don't know. Like, best I could do.
Okay, let's zap over there then.
Zap to the spoiler section. Aaron, are you okay to zap to the spoiler section, or do you have anything kind of unspoilery to add?
I'm good to walk normally there, but I still can't get into the puns. I just can't do it. Yeah, that's it.
Fair enough. Okay, let's do that. Now we can talk freely, which is good. So, we kind of touched on this earlier, but after the pilot, we were all very enthusiastic about the pilot, and from what you said in the spoiler section, it seems that we all still liked it after the pilot. Is that an accurate assessment? Or, Aaron, you said there was some things that you kind of went the other way on. Can you go in a bit more detail about what those were?
Well, I think I just went the other way with what I got on with and what I didn't from Chris, in that he had trouble with the middle, but I was okay with the middle. It was the end that caught me by surprise. So I don't know which part of that you might want to talk about, or do you want to just talk about the whole thing still for a bit, or
just go into whatever works. I'm happy to jump around the.
If I pick a standout moment then that probably describes what I like about the whole season, I think I'd pick when Nyssa is newly Thunder, and I forget which episode it is, you might be able to help me with that, but she gets surprised in a parking lot, or catches somebody else being surprised in a parking lot, and then lays into two street thugs. But then immediately afterwards, she thinks, oh my god, are they still alive? And she has to run over and check that she hasn't killed them, because she's just been absolutely kicking seven hells out of them. And for me, that is a superhero show where you're still getting the fun stuff, for want of a better word, where you get to see the action and the ass kicking. But then it comes into this grounding reality where you think, oh my god, yeah, if I was a superhero and I did that to somebody, there is no guarantee they would survive any of that. And she is, of course, rightfully concerned based on the way she's been raised. And I think that adds that sort of realistic threat value to the plot that the Marvel shows have been definitely wanting, but the DC shows so far have they've always avoided. Like in Legends, what's the name of the guy who has got the fire gun? Mick. He points his big flame cannon at people, and the Nazis just get knocked back, and they're otherwise fine. But that's the physics of that universe. That's just the way it works, because we are superheroes, and that's what we do, and that's fine. If you set that up at the start, and as a conceit of the show, then that's just the way it is. We buy into that. But I quite like this sort of. I like this moment of panic, and this, as Anissa realised that being a superhero in a more realistic world isn't that. If you hit somebody, there is a small chance you will actually just break their neck if you're that strong. It has a nice little element for me that I enjoyed this show for.
I think Anissa's learning curve was one of the more interesting things about the show as well, because you had the experienced hero with Jeff. Maybe he made a few mistakes along the way, but in terms of if he was going out to accomplish something, then he knew what he was doing. He was an accomplished fighter. He knew how to strategize. He knew how to assess a situation. He knew what guys to go for first. But Anissa was learning from the ground up, and to begin with, she was doing it on her own, trying to figure out how her powers worked. So it was that, she hit a little too hard in the beginning, and that was jarring for her.
Well, they also made a bit of a specific teaching moment out of it, where, again, you'll have to help me with the specifics, but they've got to break into a place. I want to say it was a coroner's office, because they were trying to get to a
it was a coroner's office.
The end,
and she's asked to break through the wall, and she turns to her dad and asks, "Hang on, how hard should I hit this?" And he walks her through it, and it's almost the same. I forget which order they come in, actually, if one ends up being a lesson for the other or not, but it is, it's definitely in there as an actual learning curve for her, and that's nice to see from a new superhero that doesn't, within one short musical sequence, suddenly become amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's that lesson that you can't always just barge into a situation. Sometimes you've got to strategize. Sometimes you've got to be more gentle and precise about something. You can't just go and punch your way in, punch your way back out. Sometimes it needs a bit of finesse.
Especially in the world this show belongs to, because the heroes are always now outnumbered. You know, the criminal element and the kind of corruption in society is so strong that Black Lightning or Thunder, whenever they go into a situation, they're fighting uphill. And an important thing for Anissa was to learn that. I mean, Jeff already understood that, and that was kind of part of his teaching as well. Although I think part of his arc was learning the extent of that corruption as well. So there was obviously experience to be gained from both of them, but I like the idea that they gave you the experienced superhero coming back in and a brand new superhero coming up from coming from nothing.
Well, there was something about that, though, that made me have a thought that I couldn't possibly resolve, not being in the right culture to do it. But it's through those moments that I started to get this real Cosby Show vibe from a learned parent trying to teach their children who are grown up but still learning the ways of the adult world. And I thought, wonder if that was considered stereotypical for a black family if you were in Black America watching it, or whether it was not even close, and the vibe I'm getting is just because I've only watched a very small number of Black American TV shows, so it's just a pure coincidence that I happen to have drawn this poor link. But not being in that, being in white Britain, it was something I thought, I wonder if it's a thing or not. And I have no way of just knowing that. I could research it, I suppose, but it was an odd thought at the time.
I suppose there is the bit of the kind of subtext of obviously the way black people are treated in America, and the police brutality thing. We talked a bit about that in the pilot episode discussion we had, but I feel like a lot of the kind of father-daughter passing of wisdom stuff could have, you could have just done that with white characters as well. I mean, obviously the subtext existed, but you had all this. A lot of the lessons were pretty natural stuff. They were sparring, they were going out to fight people and do various things, and so I don't think the specific lessons or the teaching method was race motivated, certainly.
I think it's one of the, Jeff is one of the strongest father figures that we've seen on one of these TV shows in a long time. I mean, we talked in the episode where we talked about the pilot about the fact that this is a dad who's a superhero, which you don't see very often. But he's actually a good dad that's a superhero. He's teaching wise lessons. He's passing on wisdom. He's not going off the rails every time his daughter goes out and does something. We've not seen all of the cliches that you would normally expect from a superhero show like this about, I must keep everything a secret from my family to make sure that, that they don't get caught up in all this. He almost actively encourages it at some point.
It's interesting, the structure of the show. Obviously it's called Black Lightning, so there's a large amount of focus on Jeff and his alternate identity, and there's a really large focus on the kind of family dynamic in general. But you could almost feel like this show could, with a very slight alterations, you could call it Thunder, and it's about it's about a young woman becoming a superhero whose dad happens to be Black Lightning, and then it becomes this kind of, I guess her support team is her dad and whoever else, and you could almost see that show existing in some way. It was, you won't know this, Aaron, but that episode of Supergirl, Chris, where it flashes back to their time at high school. You can almost see that as a different kind of show, and you get tastes of what that show could be whenever it focuses on Anissa cultivating a costume, practicing by kicking washing machines or whatever it was she was kicking, and then things like that. And it could almost be called Thunder with Black Lightning as a supporting character. But the fact that they've focused it on Jeff, because a lot of the time TV dads, in inverted commas, are the supporting characters in a show, but they've kind of flipped it by making the TV dad the main character. And I think that's a big part of what makes it feel a bit more unique.
No, it's definitely something that makes it stand out a bit, in my opinion. And I thought it was some of the strongest sort of relationship stuff was between Jeff and his daughters. I thought it just worked really well. And I think you're right. You could have called this Thunder. I mean, I'm going to say I don't know why they did it, but probably more because Black Lightning is a more marketable character than Thunder. And if they'd called it Thunder, people might have looked and went, "Nah, I'm not going to watch that. That's not interesting." But I think they really could have done it. I think you're right with a bit of tweaking about backstory and stuff, and the way some of the lessons are put over. You really could change it around.
Yeah, I'm glad they did what they did, because I find the idea of focusing a show on a community leader who happens to be a superhero and a father at the same time. It's just there's so many different bits to Jeff, and I like the way they kind of all both complement and conflict with each other. So his life as a principal is kind of hurts his life as Black Lightning, because there's no way you can successfully combine the two, and ultimately they say at some point, I mean they say it in the pilot, that he saved a lot more people as Jefferson Pierce as the principal than he did as Black Lightning, and ultimately when he turned his back on that, I guess the community got a bit better because of his external influence. But I think part of what he wants to do is build up to to make the community better with everything he's doing rather than just one thing he's doing. But obviously it's not so easy.
Well, where you definitely see the impact of Jefferson Pierce is when they did the little newsreel when he gets arrested, and they're doing all the talking heads, and it's the majority of the people in the talking heads are talking about how Jeff has helped their daughter get into grad school, or is the only reason that they managed to get a job after they left, or all the different things that he's done to help people out that you get to see through that newsreel footage.
Yeah.
And the bit that speaks about him combining both roles is when you see him standing on the rooftop and he sees the kid from the school selling drugs on the street corner. And he's got the choice at that point whether he will confront the kid as Black Lightning or whether he'll confront him as Jeff.
Yeah.
And what he does is he goes down in his street clothes and tells him to come to after school club.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing that I really liked, is the fact that, there's a smarter way to do this than for me to go down and be all powwow about it.
Yeah, and I really liked that bit where he was kind of outed as, or supposed to be outed as Black Lightning, certainly arrested under suspicion, because he's this guy that looks exactly like Black Lightning, I suppose. Again, they don't recognise him when he has the mask on, whatever. It's just one of those things. But
it looks slightly like him, but that man's wearing goggles, and Jeff doesn't normally wear goggles, so no, there's no way.
No. He goes home at night. He doesn't go out fighting crime at night. Yeah, no problem. But it was when he was arrested. What you saw was various kids in the school were about to fight the police to stop him from getting arrested, and it just kind of shows the influence he has as Jefferson Pierce. That stuff really stands out as being an example of the world building, the strong world building that they've been doing.
Yeah, I did like that, the sort of head teacher exit tour where I think he stops at every doorway to speak to someone else and go, "Don't beat up the police, I'm going to leave." And then you turn the corner and there'd be another group and you go, "Right, don't beat up the police, I'm going to leave with them." Then he got out to the front, "Don't beat up the police, I'm going to..." And I'm like, oh my god, it's like how many people have tried to stop this all the way around?
Yeah, well, there was the bit where Anissa almost flipped out, and he was like, "No, we'll do it their way." In terms of sort of Jeff's arc, relative to kind of the way he interacts with his family, so you had that kind of will they, won't they, or pseudo will they, won't they thing that he had with his ex-wife throughout the season, and it turned out that her problem was that she just couldn't handle the stress of him being out risking his life every night. But on the same token, her realisation that she was involved, whether she liked it or not, and had to put up with it whether she liked it or not, and actually realised that she had accepted it and was able to deal with it, and that's a big part of what kind of brings them back together. I thought it was really well done, really natural, and it wasn't an easy fix for that relationship either.
No, do you know what? I quite liked the way they handled his relationship with Lynn. There was a bit of will they, won't they, but then it became pretty obvious. It's like, oh, they're going to hook up together at some point, and then something's going to go wrong, and it did. You know, as with a lot of these sort of TV things, you're like, oh yeah, if they get back together, then it's almost certainly going to break up again the next episode. And that's when, you know, the argument started over trying to take away Jennifer's powers. Yeah. And you're like, okay, that I could sort of see that there was going to be some sort of fallout. I didn't know that was going to be the reason for it, but you know, I did like sort of showing that you can have this sort of stable relationship after divorce. It wasn't a relationship where they were fighting all the time and constantly in a huff with each other, didn't want to see each other, doing all that. It was a stable relationship for the sake of the daughters, presumably. But, you know, it still seemed like quite a stable thing. I mean, even from the first episode, you could tell that. Yeah, they weren't together, but they were still parents. That was the distinction that you could make. But obviously, she was his confidant as Black Lightning. She had her own relationship with Gambi. She had her own opinions and everything. And I just like the way that Lynn moved around within that different sort of dynamic. And you know, when Anissa gave her all the information to look into that kind of genetic restructuring stuff, and when Lynn said, when the time comes, you'll tell me, right? And you know, she recognizes that she's not or she doesn't want to talk about what's going on yet, but she kind of trusts that she's done a good job enough of raising her daughters that they will be honest before it's too late to be honest, kind of thing. So there wasn't as much of this everyone's lying and keeping secrets and, you know, jumping around all that. I mean, we know how much that drags down some of the other shows. So it's good that kind of any secret that didn't linger for too long, and the approach to it was very mature. No, definitely, I agree with you there.
It's kind of weird actually with Lynn and the family, because normally when people are so absolutely perfect, I find it annoying, and it's difficult to describe, or I can't remember good examples of when I've seen this before, but when nobody has any troubles whatsoever, I think there can be this point where I struggle to relate to them. Now, I didn't find the characters annoying, so I can only assume that most of what they did was still so very human that it didn't rub me up the wrong way at all, so that's good. I did struggle slightly at the start when the reason she re-accepts Black Lightning is, won't somebody please think of the children? And I thought, oh, do we really have to make it so obvious a reason why they're going to get back together again and accept his powers? And then, fortunately, though, that didn't seem to come back into the later episodes. It was more about parents dealing with their children's trouble. And I think perhaps because you want there to be such a thing as good parenting out there, maybe it was just nice to see that between Lynn and her daughters. So I think I'm going to say that I did like their family dynamic, but I'm struggling to put any better reason on it other than I didn't find it annoying when I thought I was going to.
Fair enough. I wouldn't say that Lynn was perfect as such. I mean, I can't think of any mistakes she made, although there were certainly some. There were some things that she would do or say that were, you know, they were kind of in opposition to what other people were doing and saying. And
but you know what I mean? They had a perfect family. You know, nobody had any trouble in that family whatsoever with the things that normally cause families to fight, at least fall out slightly. You know, you just have a bit of a bad day with each other. You know, you're four people stuck in one house, and you've got to come home to them, and you've got to spend time with them in the evening, and you have to be there sleeping. And if someone snores and it keeps the rest of the house up, you know, there are things that just mean that a natural family environment has daily trouble. And teenagers are especially narked by any problem, generally because that's the kind of emotional framework you're in as a teenager. And this family didn't have any of that. Any time any of the daughters had any trouble, they were able to reasonably quickly deal with it with their parents. Even the daughters, who blatantly steal each other's clothes, did just get over it. It was like, you've taken my jacket, but then a little bit later on, I'm totally okay with that because you're my loving sister. So it became more of a jokish challenge that you took my clothes. But the normal setup in a household with two daughters who can wear each other's clothes is, you better give me that jacket right now or I'm going to tear your arm off to get it back. and the parents have to step in and solve fights. Now I know one of the daughters here is older, and I know the other one isn't really that young, but still you want there to be some realization that I don't care how good you are, you can be based in a religious household that really promotes good behavior, and you can be a really wise family that knows if you have trouble you need to speak it out. But normally there's a bit of a flare up first, and I think that's what I mean by they're an absolutely perfect family, in that even when they had fallings out, they immediately solved that with exactly the right psychological behavior. And I'll go back to where I started from, though. I mean, I didn't find it annoying. I think it was good to see that. And I think that the fact that they did use the right psychological behavior could be simply the reason why, of course, they were able to solve their problems so quickly. So you could consider it to be skillful. But it catches me out because they were seemingly so perfect. Their troubles were entirely external in that sense. And I think they were a fairy tale family, but that may be right. Maybe that was right for the plot. Maybe that did actually work. Maybe the message and the story that was wanting to come across here, that the writers planned on, did actually need a slightly fairy tale family. And as I say, because it didn't seem at odds with the rest of the plot, I didn't find it a problem, but it was a noticeable point for me that these characters, they had perfect imperfections. Even the Jekyll and Hyde behaviour that I really liked from Jeff didn't cause him any trouble in that part of his life. It didn't really cause him too much trouble anywhere, actually. And he was definitely Hyde at various points in lots of the TV shows. In lots of the episodes, explicitly one where he even beats up his own daughter. And so, whereas I liked to see the Jekyll and Hyde because it gave me a flaw for him to have, and something I could enjoy watching. It's like, well, he beats up his daughter, but then she's better again, and they forgive each other, and there's no follow-on problem from that.
I think the reason it sort of didn't bother me is because it was always consistent. You didn't have one episode where they were, mature about solving their problems, and then another episode where they weren't. So it was in every episode they had the same approach. I think the biggest point of disagreement that I picked up on was when Anissa tried to make Jennifer feel better by telling her that her dad is Black Lightning, and then both Lynn and Jeff get upset about that because they identify that as not her secret to tell, and then they have a bit of an argument about that. And again, it's a reasoned argument, and you can understand where everyone's coming from, but at the same time, it's kind of that there is that impetuous mistake that Anissa makes without really thinking about it.
I don't know that I call it impetuous there. I mean, I know what you mean. I totally get it that it was a mistake, but when it was being made, there was no point in me that said, "Oh my God, how dare you do that?" It wasn't such a mistake as I thought a line has definitely been crossed. I could see their point when they raised it, and that was the family atmosphere that they'd set up. That was the rules of the household they'd set up, and I could see that they'd crossed a line according to their own rule set. But to me it was, well, hang on a minute, we're all relatives here, I think my sister's got a problem and I want to tell her and I want to help do that. You know, it almost seemed to me to be almost the opposite. It was like, well, how dare you treat this girl Jennifer as such a child that she can't hear anything from any other setup. Now that's a bit extreme that I present out there because I don't actually believe that, but I'm putting it out as another potential perspective that I could think a completely different family could have. You know, that sisters have no rights is a more extreme, again, way of saying that, so I don't actually believe that. But again, I could see that another family could take it in that other direction. So, whereas it was a problem and the family's lines had been transgressed, to me it was, okay, well that's how your family wants to do this. It is the problem of a perfect family that has that. They have that discussion then, as you say, but it's a reasoned discussion. And Anissa immediately backs down and says, no, you're completely right. I shouldn't have crossed that line. I do believe in our family's values and I'm not going to do that again, and then move on. So it didn't throw them off for an episode.
Yeah.
It didn't cause a big stomp reaction. It didn't really upset anybody in a permanent way. And that's what I mean by it's a perfect imperfection. The imperfection is there to make them human, but it is then immediately dealt with in a very reasoned, very wise way. And we only raise our voices in order to show that we're passionate, but we immediately admit when we're wrong, and we bring ourselves back down and we say we're okay, and we get calm again. So it could have gone much more into a flame war, and it would have been still very human. So I think instead what you've got here with Jennifer's problem with the circumstance is actually the more interesting point, that they chose to go down a different route with her. She doesn't just go, that's cool, I embrace it. I think that's actually the most important part of that setup. The other part, I think, actually is still a perfect imperfection.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they are the family of reasoned debate, aren't they?
Yeah.
I mean, it is one of those things. It's like, I disagree with what you've done and here's why you're wrong. And the other one will turn around and go, well, I disagree with you thinking I'm wrong, here's why I'm right. And they settle their argument through debate, which is one of these things that you don't really see on TV shows. Like you say, is that most of the time, if there's an argument, this argument will now rage for the rest of the episode, maybe even the episode after, and then in the third episode, they'll finally get together in the last scene and go, oh, do you know what, you were right all along. Whereas in this, it's like, I agree to disagree with you, and then they move along. They move on. And that's what makes the family unit so strong in this, I think.
And they do establish that is a conscious decision they made on how they were going to raise their daughters. It was a trusting household. And you sort of see that when Jennifer just brazenly tells them that she's going to go sleep with Khalil because, because it is a trusting household. They're quite happy with her making adult decisions, but if she's going to make adult decisions, she has to be an adult about talking about them, and they make sure that it's all very safe and all that kind of stuff. And it was quite an interesting and surprising thing, and I quite like that decision by Jennifer took them completely by surprise as well, because we're like, well, we did do quite a good job of raising her, didn't we? It was that almost they were almost. Really surprised or really shocked that she would just out and out do that. So that suggests that maybe Anissa didn't do that same approach. Although, and they were very casual about her sexuality as well. That was just something that was completely accepted because in this family everyone can make their decisions, and it's not really a decision as such, but everyone is accepted for who they are. And they all just kind of get on with it quite happily because they are that strong dynamic.
I think spot on, really. I mean, the fact that the family's so open and everything makes us so strong, and like we've complained about in so many other of these programmes, is sitting there going, oh, they're keeping a secret from each other, oh brilliant, this is an argument that's going to rage on, and it's going to move on and on and on and on. So it's just nice to see that for a change.
Yeah, just they move through it, they get past it, and then move on to something else, and whatever they move on to is inevitably more interesting, or just as interesting. And the thing is, I quite like that Jeff has a tendency to overreact to stuff. It was like you said, Aaron, about the kind of Jekyll and Hyde side of it. He does go off the boil slightly at certain things. So when he finds out that Anissa's been fighting as a vigilante at night, like he does, he's resistant to it. And he's like, no daughter of mine is going to go out there and risk her life. And then by the end of the episode, he's like, well, she's going to do it anyway, so I might as well make sure she survives. And that's kind of that once he's had time to process it and come back to it and really think about it, it's, she's just going to do it, whether I say no or not, so I might as well just use what I know to help her out.
Well, I think that's what I mean about the speed of it all. They do get past things so quickly, but I can't emphasise again too much that I didn't mind this stuff. I think it is just a noticeable point, but it does get over that very quickly, and then all of a sudden, we're superheroes together, and whereas I definitely don't want the keeping secrets from each other. I do wonder if there was still space in this story for people to have emotional problems with each other that aren't so amazingly quickly resolved with perfect wisdom. So somebody could be upset with each other across an episode rather than immediately dealing with it. And I have a suspicion that if this is going to run for a long time through many series, and who knows how these things work these days, but if it is going to go that way, then they are going to have emotional issues to deal with that are lasting. Because if they're too perfect, then you're going to be relying entirely on the external forces of the bad guys to give them trouble. And I think that perfection will come out too much. And the bad guys will start to seem too ridiculous as they are all utterly reprehensible. And even at the moment, if you notice that the families of the bad guys and the politics of the bad guys are all truly evil. As Chris said in the opening episode, they're James Bond villain level bad. And the good guys are truly amazing, and they're all saintly, even though they're saintly humans with imperfections, again, perfect imperfections. And if it doesn't complicate a little bit, and you also still get the natural flow of these things where you get the expansionism principle. How do we top this is always the question I think the writers and producers ask. Then both of those things coming together, I think, will just point out even more how holy the family is and how demonic all of the bad guys are.
Yeah, although when you say about things that are resolved in sort of a single episode, I think that's true in the main. Although when Jennifer found out about her powers, it wasn't a simple acceptance. It took her quite a while to, and even then she's not quite there yet. But she kind of moped around for a couple of episodes and made it very clear that she has no interest in going out there and fighting crime, because she just wants to be she wants to have a normal life, and I like that approach as well, because it is that. You have so many superhero stories where they get powers and then they feel the weight of that responsibility, and they learn what they're capable of, and they feel like they have an obligation to use that to it help some greater good. And Jennifer's just like, nope, don't want any of this crap. You people are superheroes. I don't want to be this. I'd rather just get on with it and be a teenager. And she does kind of think about that for a while. And Anissa's got the alternate sort of feeling on, no, you have a responsibility, and you have that debate that rages on for quite a while. I mean, she is kind of forced to help out at some point, but that's when her dad is in danger.
Just to answer that, this is what I mean by the external forcing versus the internal. I think that her getting powers does fit into that external forces setup. It's not that somebody in the family actively gives her powers, and I know that's a rather debatable point when you're considering genetics, so I want to bring the will of this in. Mm-hmm. It's not like her father turns around to her, waves his magic lightning wand and says, and now you have powers, at which point she could reject his decision. Whereas what actually happens is there is a genetic forcing here. Nobody chose it. In fact, Jeff himself said, I honestly didn't know if this condition I had was going to spread to my daughters. And I think, did they even say at one point they thought they'd gotten away with it because it had been so long and nothing had come up? But either way, that's what actually did happen. So this is the forcing that comes from outside the family, the world impacting on them, and that stuff does carry through, absolutely, and that's good. But she doesn't necessarily suffer a choice from one of her family members or a mistake from one of her family members pushing her beyond this an end of an episode. I think it is still the external forces that last. And interesting, it was one more thing on that one. It's the final episode that brings that to a head for me, when she really panics in a nicely believable way at one point, and then she seems to immediately get over it. And I thought that came far too quick. That I am, it's like, it suddenly becomes clear, or is it Anissa that says, "There's a danger we may all die here," and Jennifer, well, I can't handle that. I just think nobody can handle that, and she really breaks down. I thought, that's an amazingly good reaction. I want to see that. That's part of her character, that she is not embraced being a superhero. But if you watch it, it's only in a matter of 5 minutes or so, and it's almost in the same scene, that she seems to somehow get over it, and she's like, "Yeah, let's fight with the family. I'm one of you now." And that was a small microcosm of the whole series, where she flips right back one side and then flips right back to the end for the finale. But the rest of it was her development was good. I can't deny that. I definitely wanted to see her as she was presented, where she was having trouble with it, because, as you say, with her one way and Anissa the other, it's both sides of the coin.
Yeah.
But I did have that trouble in the final episode.
And I found Jennifer's sort of relationship with Khalil interesting, at least to begin with, because I thought that Khalil was a bit of a symbol of what the show is really about. You know, it's that kind of, he represented the normal people, he represented the city, and he was injured, in a very real way, and he was kind of lashing out at people. And then you had this reaction from Jennifer, where she was like, "I'm really struggling to handle this," and she was worried that made her a terrible person and all that stuff. But it was, you think about someone so young, and then they have this thing, this thing happen to someone that but they don't know that well, but they're close enough to, and it's like, how do you react? What impact does that have in your life? And I don't think it makes someone a terrible person to recognise that I'm not hugely comfortable with this sort of side of it. And I really did like that. I mean, I think they went away from that very, very quickly, especially when Khalil pretty much disappeared.
They do.
But I like that idea of, and she's having trouble dealing with it, and when he's feeling sorry for himself and kind of takes it out on her, she's like, "I'm not listening to this crap," and leaves. And it's almost like she's looking for that excuse to remove herself.
Honestly, that's what I wanted to see a bit more of in the series, because of the direction they've chose to go a bit more realistic, a little less into the pure fun. It was Khalil's side of things that was threatening to push it too real, perhaps, and maybe they shied away from it because it would have made it too dark. It would have gone almost in that Marvel direction of nastiness. But I think I would have liked to have seen a bit more of it still, because Khalil has that very human reaction, and it's taken away from Jeff's family, so they don't have to suffer too much.
Yeah.
But if you can imagine that Khalil was not taken out of the picture and was constantly a thorn in Jennifer's conscience, at the same time she's then also trying to struggle with, should I become a superhero or not? Do I have a responsibility or not? Paralleled with, well, do I have any responsibility to Khalil as a previous partner, as a current partner, as just a friend, as a fellow human being? And she could really have struggled with that, especially, as you say, because she was so young. And it might have been too brutal for DC's shows, because they wanted to do something realistic, but not really that real. Or did they just remove it and it was actually a bit of a misstep? Either way, I think that was one of the, I can't call it weaknesses, but I will call it something I would have liked more of, to ground it just a little bit more in the brutality of the world, because the perfect family doesn't have a crippled daughter to deal with. Yeah. So they could sidestep the real brutality of it and keep the family reasonably perfect. But they're supposed to be showing us that this is a black community that has been literally stepped on by the white government. And I totally get that they're telling me that the kids are poor, except all of the kids have really perfect white shirts on. And they're telling me that the kids have trouble with drugs. But the guy, the first kid that takes drugs and he's in the bathroom, he looks like a perfect middle-class student until he goes nuts and starts ripping the toilets out, obviously. But up until that point, they are pristine students. The school is so clean. There are no people who are young and trying to show off their sexuality too young. When a gun's brought into the school, it's because of a single gang connection, but you don't get the feeling there are lots of gang connections. That it's not really a New York inner city school where they've got like metal detectors on every door and there's security guards literally everywhere, and the drugs aren't packaged up nicely. They're probably in someone's desk, and they'll actually try and sneak a bit in the middle of English because, quite frankly, the teacher doesn't dare challenge them. So the niceness of the family does actually kind of extend into the niceness of the school. You kind of think, oh, Jeff is a really amazing principal because he has managed to remove all problems from his school. And they do make points to say that he does have trouble students, but even the trouble students immediately fall in line with him, unless they've just been threatened by a key major bad guy, in which case they have to break ranks. So it's got this perfect environment, almost, but it's a perfect imperfect environment. And Khalil could have broken that up a bit more, I think, to add a bit more fuss, a bit more reality to it. But yeah, maybe that's too dark.
Yeah, well, there was a lot of effort made to show that the school was this oasis in the middle of all the craziness. So the clean hallways and the pristine looking students and all that stuff is, it's kind of part of that. Plus, it's also a CW show at the end of the day.
Yeah,
there are no unattractive people on the CW. It's just a fact of life. That's just what happens. And I thought the school was interesting in that sense of the kind of, here is where the problems of outside don't really creep in. And they do start to creep in as the show goes on. There's an attack at the school. Tobias attacks the school because that is a powerful symbol of, I can infect any part of this society, even this thing that has been meticulously built to be a counter to that society. But with the Khalil thing as well, the thing about what happens to him is the perfect example of, bad things can happen to good people because he does all the right things. He takes all the opportunities Jeff gives him. He stays away from drugs. He concentrates on bettering himself, setting himself up for the future. And then it's just in one fell swoop, it's all taken away from him. And that is a very brutal example.
Where's that's true? Do you know what I thought was better? And it was, I'm feeling like I'm bringing up all the negative stuff, but I feel like I'm just playing counterpoint here. That's all. So I don't feel like this is entirely all just me being dark again. Maybe it is. Who knows? But where I thought it was done more interestingly was Lala's influence. Because when Tobias comes in, he comes in as a James Bond villain. He should have had his little cat with him, and he was over the top. But Lala comes in as, hello, I can make your kids do what I want because I've got control of them. I've got the drugs and I've got the money and I've got the nastiness. I don't need superpowers to do it. And when Lala sends somebody into a school with a gun, that's threatening. That's real life power. Yeah. And so everything you've just said, I would like to have seen more of that through Lala, actually, because of not only just that reason, I think it's that little bit more realistic, but also because I thought Lala was underused and wasted at the end. I mean, he goes out and then he comes back in, and it's this weird thing that he's got, and it brings the mystical in. You think, oh God, where's this going? This is a totally new thing, and then it's thrown away at the end by Tobias going, "Sorry, yeah, mate, that's just a wacky side effect of the new science." And what? You've tapped into the essence of spirituality. It's just a side effect of your weird science. Dear God, you don't just laugh that off. That's ultimate power over people's spirits. You should go back into that science room, find the scientist who did it and say, new project, okay? We've got some really important stuff to do here. But so I think
it was never clear if that was actually like the actual ghosts of these people, or if it was, if it was just he was a hallucination of some kind. But I quite liked the way they did that, actually, because what you have is this conscience haunting someone, who's done terrible things, and Lala consistently said, "You know what? I'm glad I killed you. Leave me alone." And he was just kind of dealing with those. It was it 2 or 3 ghosts that he had to deal with? Definitely 2.
Definitely 2. I can't remember, but yeah, definitely 2.
I can't remember if there was a third, but it was Lawanda, and I forget who the other one was. But and that wasn't until towards the end anyway. But it was when they were trying to essentially make him feel bad about what he was doing, and he just refused to feel bad about what he was doing. I think that said a lot about how committed he was to the decisions that he made, I suppose. And
then it doesn't go anywhere. Then he's just... not only is he off screen for a lot of time, but then he's brought back with some crazy thing that doesn't mean anything ultimately for the plot. I mean, it could have done, as you say, it was this, if you are a bad person, your bad actions can come back and haunt you. And it feels like that is definitely thematically connected to a show that uses religious phrases for its show titles and has a very perfect family at the center of it. They're good conscience people. They're very wise people. It feels like Lala would have been a much better first season villain for this ethical, moral show than Chris. You're going to have to name him as his Bond villain. I can't call him Tobias anymore. He needs a Bond villain name. We're going to have to start calling him that. Especially because the plot had too many. The plot had too many bad guys at the end that everybody was like, "Can we have a go, please?" And and then Lala's at the bottom of that pile, so he doesn't even get to be. When he gets to put his hand up and have a shot at the end, it's like, yeah, no, there's just no plot left for you, mate. Human bomb, that's all we've got. Take it or leave it.
I'm sure he's not dead though. Like, I'm sure that.
I hope not. Because, as I say, he was the most interesting bad guy to then be used so little, possibly even so poorly. That's a massive shame, I thought.
I thought the sort of the insane guy that's able to talk to dead people running around town, just being a bit of a nuisance in the background, to be honest, would have been quite an interesting turn for a later season. I do hope that he comes back, but I think that bomb was pretty definite. But his
death in the first place was pretty definite as well. So
well, that's true.
Yeah. So
how much of him needs to survive to be able to reanimate? I don't know. I don't know the mad science that's behind this. The Bond villain, but it's
yeah. And I think you're right about there being too many villains towards the end. I think the ASA and I'm blanking on the lead guy's name. Proctor. Was it Proctor?
Oh, I just knew him as the ASA bad guy.
The Donald Trump analogue.
Proctor, yeah, that was him.
So I think he was introduced too late to be interesting, and then by the time they introduced him, they didn't do anything with him really, other than being a kind of a symbol of whatever Gambay can regret in his past. And I actually liked that idea, especially when you had Gambay almost appearing to play both sides early on. When you had Lady Eve around, I thought she was killed a bit too quickly, and she was more interesting than her death deserved. And I like the idea of she and Gambay set up Freeland to be the thing it is, and there was a lot of compromising to make it, to make the system work. So it's kind of the idea that Gambay accepts that Lady Eve is going to do certain things because overall it keeps more people safe, and Gambay's sort of pragmatic approach to protecting people was an interesting counter to Jeff's eventually, but I do like the idea that he is willing to make those compromises because he thinks there is a greater good at play. It's better that he makes that compromise than let everybody run riot, and because the end result of that is just chaos.
I mean, a lot of the compromises and stuff that he made, a lot of the rules that he put in place was the Pierce family are off limits. He does a lot of it to protect them. You know, it's like that is the deal that I have made to allow them to be safe. You know, to keep the Friedland High safe and everything. He's made these promises. I mean, I really like the turnaround with Gambi, and I think you're right about the amount of villains that they seem to burn through them quite quick towards the end. And you're like, you could have done a season on each of them, or you know, half a season on each of them, given a bit more building. But it seemed that a lot of them were put in for Tobias to conquer, really, in the background. Yeah. While Jeff's off running about the SA, you know, he's basically helping Tobias work his way up. Yeah. It's in all the chaos that's ensuing around him.
I mean, part of it is that Jeff doesn't really know who his enemies are. That's another problem, you know, and that's a kind of typical superhero thing. It's like, you know, the hero is focusing on villain A, while villain B is the bigger problem. And that's essentially what Tobias was. But in the conversation I'm thinking of between Gambi and Lady Eve, is the bit where he said that Tobias is like ridiculous. You know, he's running riot. You have to keep control of him. And Eve says, I can't give you Tobias, but I'll give you like his underling. And so Gambi just goes in and kills him. And it's to set that kind of example that she isn't to be messed with. But I think Tobias is too well connected and well protected to be offed at that point because of the connections that he's made himself. So it's that kind of idea that, yeah, there is a bit of a powder keg brewing in the background, and Jeff doesn't know the full story, and the problem is Gambi keeps a lot of it to himself to protect him, which is acknowledged as a mistake on his part, but still. I found Gambi to be one of the weaker elements of the show early on, but I found it more interesting when it seemed like, when it was revealed that he was kind of involved in everything in different ways.
Yeah, I mean, at first I was like, oh, he's going to be kind of the Alfred guy who, I've made you a new suit and I've fixed this and off you go. I've made the gadget that's going to save the day in this particular episode. And then as they dug around, and you're like, you're left guessing, going, well, what side is he playing here? He's either playing them or he's playing Jeff. And it turns out he's sort of playing both, really, part of the way through, and then, you know, commits fully towards the end. I mean, the episode where he's basically been beaten to a pulp and still refuses to give Jeff up is brilliant. I think it was a really good episode, that one. It's, you know, it just shows the strength in the character and the lengths that he was willing to go to protect that family.
Yeah, and that's the one where Proctor does learn, or thinks he learns, that Black Lightning is Jeff, because it's, hang on, you're protecting Black Lightning and you're protecting Jeff, so therefore they must at least know each other. You know, it's like, and I guess from Proctor's point of view, he doesn't really know who Jeff is. I mean, I suppose he'll know a bit when he'll know about his connection to Gambi, but it won't be in his thoughts a lot. But the idea that they were smart enough to make that connection, I quite liked as well.
I don't know, actually. I'm not sure. I leave him as neutral in my head, in that he was used for a specific purpose throughout, and it occurred to me properly at the end what that purpose was. But when I looked back, I'd never felt that I saw it. And I think the defining point is in the end scene, where you've got the really good, wholesome family standing around the villain, realizing that they've got a problem. You know who we are, what we're going to do about it. And Gambi comes in at the end as the person who is compromised and, you know, morally. He's the one that can cross the line. He's done it all his life, so he's the one at the end that, of course, can shoot the bad guy. And I was thinking that I intellectually understood that was Gambi's role in the plot. He was the one who was broken by the world. He was compromised where the others wouldn't. He would cross the line. He's done bad things while they've still not. But when Gambi was at the start seeming a bit dodgy, he just seemed a bit dodgy. I knew there was going to be more in his plot when he was keeping things from Jeff, and there's going to be a backstory there, but that's as far as it went. It wasn't any more than me intellectually thinking, yeah, there's some backstory there. We'll probably learn that soon. I didn't go, oh my God, that was nasty. How can he possibly be a friend of the good guy? You know, because he didn't do anything. Yeah. Spoke kindly, friendly with the bad guys. I think that carries on throughout. There's this thought that he's done some bad things, and I kind of know on paper that he's been spotting kids and sending them away to prison, but I didn't really feel like it was evil. Somehow it was like he was just sort of sending the kids on a bit of a nasty holiday. I didn't really connect with him being a horrid person in his past who had since come round and redeemed himself. So I think the reason I'm feeling a bit neutral about him is because he never really swung far enough in either direction for me to really feel what I know his character was supposed to be. I got it. I picked it up from the plot. You know, I intellectually worked it out, but the character never really hit me hard in a way that I thought there was this sword of Damocles hanging over the head of the good guys, and at any moment he could turn on them. Like it somehow I can't say it was the performance. I don't know if was it just the writing? Was it just the threat? I don't know. I don't know why I didn't connect with him stronger than I did.
I found him to be the weakest part of the show kind of early on, but, you know, as they did start giving him more, or they started telling us more about him, I was more interested in it. Like, as I said, I liked him kind of playing all those different sides in his own way, and I guess being deluded into thinking he had more of control of the situation than he actually did. I mean, the point where he's honest with Jeff, I think the rift that crops up between them is a bit overcooked. Although that could be part of Jeff's tendency to overreact. But I also like that the other characters make up their own mind. Lynn still goes to speak to him, although she never seems to like him to begin with. She just goes to see him because she has to. And then Anissa's relationship with him is very different as well. And she chooses not to let her father's, at that time, opinion of him dictate how she's going to interact with him. So that's all good. I think he had an important role in the show, and the sort of ambiguity that existed around him was interesting. I don't know that it's completely successful, and it's one of those things, once you find out the kind of extent of it, it's less interesting. So there's that kind of middle ground where you're finding out little bits and pieces, but not the full story. Because the whole ASA thing wasn't that interesting. I mean, sort of Freeland being an experiment by this government organisation to turn people into metahumans.
I think that's possibly where I started to struggle with it, because the foundation of the character plots are so grounded in these are troubles faced by real black Americans at the moment, to then have that spin up into, and the threat to the city is from secret government experimentation, which, if you take in any other superhero show, would of course make perfect sense. You know, that's what evil governments do in superhero shows. They are effectively twirly moustached villains that the heroes have to defeat. But it's that disconnect with, as I say, when you open with real black American trouble, and even drugs. I totally get, of course, that drugs fit into that, but turning your average, poor, lower-class member of your society into super soldiers is not currently a problem faced by black America. You know, so it's like it was really far out. And so when Gamby turns up and says, yeah, I've been a bad boy, it's like, well, yeah, you've been a bad boy in a superhero universe. That's totally forgivable, because you can redeem yourself by just saving somebody falling off a building, and then it's fine, you know. But then you try and put them up against the very moral, religious family, and the measure should be completely different. Well, no, sorry, I can't measure you against superhero redemption stories anymore. I need to kind of bring you back into the real world, in which case what you've done is worse than a hanging offence because of what you've done to all of those kids. So again, it's that thing where intellectually I totally see how bad this is, but I think I struggled to connect them because they were so different, maybe. Maybe?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Another part of the issue was that the whole super soldier, in pod thing didn't go anywhere. It just kind of petered out. I mean, it's maybe a tease for next season, or maybe it's not. But the thing is, it didn't really pay off. Although I do like how the finale went back to focusing on the family, and it didn't resolve. It didn't resolve the problems of the city, because the problems of the city can't be resolved in a single season because they're systemic. So you can't just wave a magic wand and sort it. There is at the end of the first season, the situation is pretty much the same as it was at the start of the season. The only difference is there's a few people dead who were doing stuff, but the problem of drugs still exists. The gang warfare still exists. I mean, Tobias is at the head of the criminal chain without opposition at this point. Although you probably will have some opposition next season. All that stuff. So, like, the problems are still there, and maybe they can't be solved. I don't know, but the
problems are bigger than that one city, though. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Although, do we know that now? Because at the end, it's suddenly revealed that the ASA is actually a rogue department. The government's nice after all, and it's just one dude who's gone nuts.
Yeah, Proctor was a rogue part of the ASA as well. So the ASA are a wider organisation that have a different agenda. But he had just gone rogue within that organisation.
Certainly the city's still got problems, though, as you say. There's still going to be drugs, and presumably Tobias will still manage to run whatever is the current iteration of the 100 Gang.
Yeah.
But what a lead villain, though, in Tobias is quite a just absolutely off the chain villain.
Yes.
I mean, it's the first villain that I've seen in a while on telly, and one of these DC shows that goes and kills his own father in an absolutely brutal way, and then walks off. It's just I'm going to say a throwaway scene, like a couple of minute scene that reveals how badly he's been treated, the reason he's ended up the way he has. And that's his resolution to it, to make himself feel better, is he breaks his back and leaves him to slowly die in his own home. Yeah. And you're going, oh my God, the proper evil villain.
You thought it was going to go a different way, actually. I thought when we started to see that episode and the sister's still in there and they're all chatting away and you start to learn about his past, you think you're going to be watching the episode where we suddenly feel for the bad guy. He's just misunderstood. He had a bad past, and it's led him astray, and maybe Jeff is going to speak to him at the end and say, oh, you're just like one of my kids at school. If only you'd have had the right mentoring, you wouldn't have become evil, you'd have become nice. And then the bad guy would turn around and go, yeah, you're right, I should have done nice things. But no. As you say, you get a bit of sympathy, and then it points out, nope, I am truly evil. Absolutely. I've embraced it. It's me now. It wasn't my dad. Actually, I'm up for this evil. As you say, bit of backbreaking, leave him to suffer, done, mic drop.
He's a great villain, and I think there's a bit of subtext in the fact that he's played by like a white rapper as well. He's... Obviously, it's a show predominantly with a black cast, and he's a white rapper, and or the actor playing him is anyway. And then you've got this thing about the fact that he is actually also a black guy, but he's an albino, so he's kind of an outcast. He's not white, he's not black. He just doesn't fit in anywhere, and he kind of resents the universe for doing that to him as well. And he has that inferiority complex where he has to rise to the top of everything, and that's why he can't just take orders and put up with his penthouse with his piranhas that he can feed people to whenever he wants. And I like that kind of constant reaching for more, because he just wants more constantly.
Oh, it's trying to get back that control he used to have. He was a city councilman. He had worked his way all the way up to the top, and then it's snatched from him. The ambition that he had when he was a councilman was probably higher than that. It was, I'm going to be governor, I'm going to be senator, I'm going to be president, whatever, Yeah. That's what I'm aiming for. And then he gets taken down, and then that's it. It's all over. He's got to go into the shadows. He's got to hide.
Is that where they had too many angles, though? I was wondering, because you're saying, was there a theme to it? And I sort of believed that there was a theme, because you had Proctor, as you say, he was Donald Trump. They don't even hide that. In the end, they just say, let's do this, and they really make it clear. So he's the official representative of white economic upper class evil.
Yeah.
And then you've got Lala, who is street level, corrupted black evil, who has embraced the pain of the world and decided that the only way they can deal with it is, of course, to become the evil. And then you've got Tobias in the middle, who is almost literally a black person turned bad by the evils of the white world, and is therefore now literally white in colour. And I'm thinking, well, that's all your angles. You've totally covered all of the themes there that you could do on how black society has been crushed by this white dominance. But bringing all three of them in together brings us back round maybe to that problem of too many evils, because maybe they didn't get to explore any of them. You reckon Proctor's is boring? Well, because there is no way of getting three different evils in that sense enough screen time to make them, to make them interesting, to give Lala enough time to actually show what he was interesting, to actually turn Proctor into something useful, and then turn Tobias into anything other than a Bond villain.
I think you're right. I mean, the thing is, it's like at that point when Proctor's introduced, there's not enough time for them to do anything. You've already got Tobias out on the prowl. You've already got other villains that are sort of back and roaming, and you're like, who's this guy? Where's he come from now? All right, okay, he's going to be, he's pulling the strings, but you get the impression that he's got no way of controlling Tobias at all. You know, and even Tobias is plotting, like almost immediately when he's introduced to him, is plotting his demise.
There's one exception to Tobias, people that can control Tobias. There's every conversation he's in, he's essentially the winner. He has the most, the power of intimidation. He has the stature. He's just a menacing presence. But when Lady Eve talks to him, she's able to give him the dressing down that he can't counter, able to tell him exactly who's in charge and send him on his way. And I found, and that's why I think they shouldn't have killed her off so soon, because I like the idea that she is above him in every conceivable way. She's not afraid of him. She knows what buttons to push to get him to back down, all that stuff. I think they wasted a character there.
I was hoping for her to escape at the end. When she discovers the plot, she notices what's going on. She picks up the gun, she's shooting people. I thought, if she escapes, she is going to cause him all kinds of hell. And she gets taken out. And I thought that, I was really disappointed in that. I'm a bit like you. I think there was a lot more to come from that character.
Her death as well was interesting in terms of the public reaction to it, because obviously she's not a well-known crime boss. She's a black female philanthropist in a society that doesn't have an awful lot of those. So it was clear that people looked up to her, people respected her, and the community lost something important when she died. And this kind of talking heads approach they took to pivotal events was always good, because it did give you that. Here's what the city thinks of this.
I did like those. I mean, they used it a few times, and it was, what is the word on the street after this particular episode or this particular fight? And I liked the way that played out, because it did give you an impression of the street eye view. And they also got their digs in about the slant that the media use when covering stories on black violence or gang culture, and how they try and spin a story to tell something completely different or to fill their own narrative.
Well, I might add to that just by saying I wonder if they might have used that a bit more. It was something that did come up, as you say, sometimes, but it wasn't a thing, a gimmick, a medium mined completely for its a full effect, and I don't know if it was possible to do any more than they did with it, but to me it's possible that it had that same link into the other things we've just discussed about how there was a lot of stuff that maybe didn't get fully used. So that image of black society being presented through the media could have been a bigger thing. But again, maybe I'm sort of seeking too much, because ultimately they did want Black Lightning to remain a more fun show. As you say, it's on the Fun Network, so it was never going to be a dark piece. But when you present all these good ideas, sometimes you can't help but think, oh, well, maybe I would have liked to have seen a bit more of that. Maybe this could have gone somewhere.
Yeah, well, I mean, the talking head stuff, I think it could have been one of those things they did in every episode, and it would have been massively overused, and it had just been one of those things where you're like, why are they doing this every week? But I think it gave you a range of opinions, and it's something that, Arrow doesn't do. And I use Arrow as a specific example because that is specifically a show about someone trying to save their city, in the same way that Jeff is. Although, they have radically different methods that allow them to do that. But the thing is, in Arrow, you never feel like there's a city out there that he's actually saving. It's a collection of warehouses that he goes and shoots arrows at people in, and you kind of don't get that on the street viewpoint. But giving us that on the street viewpoint through side characters, through little bits of dialogue here and there, and through news reports with the talking heads. And one of the most striking ones for me was it was where Jeff was arrested, and they were talking about how, there was a negative opinion about him in the news. It was all about how he was grooming kids to be a certain way or whatever else. I can't remember the exact wording, but it was interesting to get the other side of the perspective as well, just to show that not everyone is on the same page.
Yeah, there was that one woman that's going, and apparently he brainwashes the kids into calling him Black Jesus, and then you're going, and I think that's just wrong. And I was like, oh, okay, and that's the one that made it into the mix. You know?
Yeah, and it kind of proves the point about the media narrative that gets built, isn't it?
We've got to get balance on this story. We've got three people that say there's no way he would be a drug dealer, and then there's one person that goes, he's nuts. He's getting kids to call him Black Jesus. Of course, he's a drug dealer. Yeah, hang him. It's one of those. It's very, very famous. And I agree with what you say, that you get a better impression. Not a better impression, when you get a better view of this city than you do in the other shows where you've got no idea what Star City or Central City or anything is. Yeah. But you do get quite a good impression, or at least a full view of what Friedland's like.
Well, there was other little bits I liked, just little touches, especially with how people react to Black Lightning. I think it's in the second episode where he just goes into a hotel because he's going to attack some criminals. And the doorman's like, yep, they're on the third floor, off you go up. It's good to see you again, Black Lightning. It's that kind of casual reaction. Or the guy that he's about to beat up wants a selfie with him. That was a really funny moment. And it gives you the idea of the impact that Black Lightning has on people, the way that people talk about him and all that stuff. I think it's really strong the way that comes across, and it's little things like that. He is very much a hero of the people, to use that phrase, rather than being his own, being held up on his own ideals. It's the idea that the people do respond to him. There's even the bit where they use holograms.
How they're getting people to cheer the hologram as it goes through the streets, yeah. And
it's the idea that the very sighting of Black Lightning and Thunder are able to, to bring out hope in people. And the idea that Thunder was growing more popular than him online. I mean, according to Jennifer, I don't know what she's checking, but...
Yeah, a better Facebook following, or whatever the line was, I can't remember,
Yeah. So that's all interesting stuff. I do like seeing the kind of impact, the friendly neighbourhood Spider-Man element, if you will. So what about Black Lightning, or the handling of Black Lightning in general as a hero? I'm not crazy about the costume. I think it looks stupid. It's just this big fluorescent neon lit thing. I think Anissa's costume is much better.
Yeah, I thought Anissa's was a lot better, but the thing that got me about
one better.
the thing that got me about the Black Lightning costume was he was sort of doing the same thing that you see on Arrow or whatever, where they're standing on a rooftop, being really subtle and out of the way. However, you're like, listen, buddy, that's not going to work for you. You're lit up like a Christmas tree. It's like, I don't know how he wasn't spotted more often as he was standing on rooftops.
But it's like you said in the pilot discussion, he hides next to billboards and stuff, so, he's less noticeable. But I guess it's the idea that he does want to get noticed as well. He wants people to see him, which doesn't work for stealth missions, but, in general, I think the idea that he wants to be seen.
It was the one where he was hiding because he wanted to take out Tobias.
Yeah.
And he's standing on the roof and he's considering whether he's going to go and take him out or not. And they've got the bodyguards come out of the car first with the big machine guns, and they're sort of having a look around the rooftops and checking the alleyway to make sure everything's clear, and none of them spot the neon the neon black lightning standing on the rooftop above.
The episode where you got the ability to fly was a bit weird. I wasn't crazy on that.
And they never really went back to that again either. It's like they did it a couple of times and then went, well, that's very expensive. Let's not put that shot in again.
Yeah.
The theme of the show is trying to connect it into a more real situation. So they bring in his popularity on social media. They bring him into the news media, and for me that had a good place. It needed to be there. Honestly, I can't picture Thunder's outfit at all in terms of that more traditional superhero setup. I can see that with Black Lightning they wanted to keep some sort of 70s angle. I can only assume that it was originally a comic in the 70s. So that was why it was a bit more of an over-the-top costume.
Yeah.
I suppose it's a surprise they didn't try and tone it down slightly, because with everybody else they've tried to take anything that's a little bit too wacky and modernize it slightly, tone it down a bit, make it a bit sleeker, make it a bit cooler, rather than vivid and over the top. But yeah, you get that straight away at the start, though, that he is a hero from the past. And he's coming back now.
Yeah.
So to a certain extent, I can see that they wanted to make that emphasis clearer in his design. He's the past, and his costume shows you that he has that connection, whereas Thunder is now. So she's got maybe a sleeker, more up to date costume. So we needed to draw that distinction, maybe. I don't know, when you start getting the Bond villains coming in, having a guy walking around in bright lightning, it didn't stand out for me because other people were so nuts, and it kind of picks up the pace towards the end too, where they quickly have to explain to you how Khalil is managing to knock people out with darts, and you're thinking, what? Yeah. Where did that come from? That's just this random extra power. It's like somebody had written in a hell of a lot of backstory and then suddenly remembered the supervillain he was based on and had to quickly ram that in. So I think Khalil was the weirdest of them in terms of did it fit in with the rest of it, whereas Black Lightning, I'd sort of been introduced it from episode 1, so I didn't have anything to reject. Because it was either, do you like it or don't? If you don't like it, you shouldn't be watching the show, sort of thing. Whereas some of the other ones come in later, in which point you've got this established setup that is going to be interrupted, and that could really bother you. So it didn't bother me. I think I'd already accepted Jeff's costume, so I didn't question it.
I like the Black Lightning persona. The kind of sarcastic, almost dickish way he would talk to people. Whenever he would call Henderson up and just essentially make fun of him while giving him information or taking information, and then sort of either hang up or leave, before Henderson could retort. I think it was quite a fun little persona. It's almost like, I don't get to do this in any other time in my life, so I'm just going to take advantage of the fact that I can behave any way that I want. And it's maybe a little bit childish, but also can't really blame him.
Very good for the disguise as well.
Yeah.
You've got to somehow accept the fact that I can't look at the shape of your face and immediately tell who you are, so I need some way of making the two personalities seem different. So what's different to a very respectable, wise school teacher? Well, it's this, as you say, cocky, backstreet, physical guy who just doesn't take anything too seriously. Maybe that helps with the mask, as it were.
I also like that fighting is always the last resort for him. Whenever he goes into a situation, he'll try and talk whoever it is down, or warn them that they should stand down because the consequences won't be something that they'll like. And then so he gives them that choice, and then when they attack him, he'll fight back. I like that. It's a bit different.
Yeah, the fact they commit to it as well. They even get him saying that to his daughters and getting the daughters to well, maybe more Anissa than Jennifer, but at least with the more prodigal daughter, she follows that line of thinking too. And it bothered me early on, actually, before I really caught on what was going on, why he quickly gets into fights, despite the fact that he says, I believe in talking first. But then when I realised it was a Jekyll and Hyde thing, and I know I'd been shown it in the first episode, it shouldn't have been a surprise, but somehow I managed to totally miss it. But by about the third or fourth episode, you're suddenly realising, oh yeah, the lightning in his eyes and the anger taking over, that's the opposite personality. That's him not being able to control it. So when he doesn't talk first, because there are a few times when he doesn't try and talk first, but the reason is because the anger has taken him. And even then, sometimes he can control that anger, and when he's arrested, he holds back and then gets his students to hold back. So he's not a total Jekyll and Hyde, but they're a nice combination of things.
Well, I think the clearest example of the talk first thing was when Jennifer was attacked by the two girls in I think it was a bowling alley. She was attacked anyway, and she fights back and then, takes them both out, and he's like, well, no, you shouldn't have started that fight. It's like, well, technically they started it, but it was a whole, you have to be better than that, and then he was secretly impressed, or not so secretly to her, actually. He was secretly impressed as far as Lynn was concerned, but it's like, two girls? Well done.
You took on two, yeah.
That was a nice little touch, that, and even though, like, the costume, it just puts me off a little bit, but I like the kind of persona that they built around him, and, it's something that, I think it's, to compare it to the other shows, something Arrow does very well. Green Arrow, or the Arrow, or the Vigilante, or the Hood, or whatever they're calling him this week, is very different to Oliver Queen. But, like, they've not built a persona for the Flash on the Flash, have they? I mean, it's just, he's just Barry. He acts exactly the same, so there's no real difference there. If you met both of them, you could easily believe they're the same person. Or both of them from the perspective of you not knowing who they are. But the Black Lightning persona is very different. And I didn't really think of the Jekyll and Hyde type thing. I mean, I thought that he maybe had a bit of an anger management problem, but I didn't really see it as an alternate personality as such.
It's more that it just... All I mean by that is it stopped him from being able to live his morals and his ideals. I mean, there were moments when he can control it, but he had to specifically control it at points where the anger was going to take over, such that he could then actually enact his personal philosophy. So it wasn't a literal second personality, but it was a fight within him still, which is the metaphor for Jekyll and Hyde is, it is supposed to be, was that allegorical, metaphorical, who knows? The real people in us, that we don't actually have a real monster, obviously. We just have this emotional fight. And for him, it was an emotional fight. I want to be a good guy. I want to be wise. I want to be the principal who will educate people. However, there is part of me that dresses up as a superhero and goes out and beats the crap out of these villains, because to a certain extent that's what everybody would like to be able to do, but you've got to try and be the good guy. So it's a battle, and it's nice that sometimes he wins that battle and he can actually resist it, and he doesn't beat everybody up when he gets arrested. But sometimes when things go too wrong, he does get angry, and he just gives in, and he lets rip. And when his daughters are captured and taken to some, I forget what they call it, the name of the hotel, when the daughters are taken to that hotel, the people he meets there, he picks them up with a light beam and he slams them into cars. So sometimes he loses it, and it's they give you both sides, which is nice and balanced and good for the plot.
Yeah. So Anissa, by contrast, is a very different sort of superhero. You know, she's very idealistic in the beginning, and I like the kind of activist streak she has. You know, she goes about throwing stuff at statues and protesting and all this stuff. She gets arrested, it's at least twice in the run of the show for protesting, and then it's when she uses the Thunder persona, because she appears and destroys the statue and things like that. But I quite like how that fed into her exploits as a hero, as Thunder, when they were doing a bit of a stakeout, and she read the lips, and it's like, I'm always at these things. I like to read what people. I've learned how to lip read because I want to know what these people are saying, and that's something that Jeff can't do. And it's like, she's improving on me as a hero. So that's that was a nice little touch as well.
I think it was a good element to that character. The fact that she becomes a vigilante is kind of like an extension. I like the fact that they made that difference between the two daughters. That you've got one that wants to go out there and change things, and the other one doesn't want to cause a fuss. Essentially, a lot of what they do. So I did like the fact that she was an activist. It did get to show a different side. It did get to show that there were people fighting the system in the proper way in Friedland. There were people going walks and marches and protests in order to try and affect real change. It wasn't the fact that no one cared and no one was making a difference. It was only the vigilantes that were doing it. Yeah,
and it's more about the societal side of it as well, because because it is the people that make a statement. They do go out there and they do fight for their own freedom, and they're not just waiting for a superhero to do everything. So that's also really good. The way her powers were done as well, I really liked that. She had to hold her breath to activate them, and maybe that's just because she's just learning how to use them. But it was that kind of limitation, and I love the where she's fighting. I forget the character's name now, but the character did have a name.
Cyanide.
That was it. Yeah, and so where they were fighting, and she realised that limitation and exploited it. So that was, that was a really good use of that that setup. Whereas Jeff's powers, they were just on all the time, but he could be drained, as you could see. And then that didn't really factor in until the end, but it was the idea that he would lose his powers eventually because he's like a car battery and he's older, and his powers aren't what they used to be. I quite like that idea as well. The sort of mechanics of the powers was well handled.
No, I did like the way her powers worked with the breathing in. I like the fact that it presents a weakness. It's not someone that's invincible all the time.
Yeah.
Bullets bouncing off her all the time and able to lift a car. It's like she's got to be able to breathe in. There is a limit there. And it is something that can be exploited. Otherwise, it's one of those things that if they don't write that kind of thing in, they then spend a lot of time going, right, how can we depower them this week, and how can we make them vulnerable this week? Whereas this one, they seem to have fought and built it in from the start.
Yeah. And, come back to the Flash again, where, he's fast enough to do whatever at this point, but every week he somehow manages to not be fast enough to solve the problem. And I think the built-in limitations in this show are great because it does mean that the powers aren't infallible, and you don't expect them to be infallible either. It does feel like they can be challenged. I mean, the thing is, when Jeff fights Tobias, he's no match for him. Tobias is stronger. I think it's part of it is the fact that Jeff takes him on hand to hand when he probably shouldn't, and Gamby says that there's no strategic sense in fighting him hand to hand. So there's that strategy side of it as well that's pretty good. Aaron, you always have stuff about power levels in shows.
That's true. Power level in shows are actually a big thing for me, because you brought up the reason I am no longer watching Flash. That's probably not the only reason I'm not watching Flash, but they were consistent with the power levels. they did present some intelligent combat through most of it, as you say, with Cyanide finding the weakness. I wasn't so worried about the flying when it came out. You mentioned earlier, but they didn't really use it, so it wasn't that it was an imperfect power level. It's just that it was a bit meaningless.
Well, that was
because
only
they always
thrown
fight
into,
indoors.
That was the only thing that was only thrown in to incapacitate him later in the episode as well.
Yeah. But he never had to fight a helicopter. Normally these things come up because later on they're going to need to do something. So it was more that it was just a bit of an unnecessary plot point. I think, generally speaking, the power levels were consistent. Nobody did something that they shouldn't have been able to do. And I don't think anybody was in a circumstance where I thought, well, you should have just done X and you would have gotten out of it easier. I did need the explanation for why Cyanide could take a punch from Thunder. So I'm glad they did put that in there, because I would have been I would have worried otherwise. But they did. They gave you Cyanide's backstory. Maybe it was a bit of a exposition moment, but we got it, and so it fitted. The only one I think I currently was uncertain about was Jennifer, because the only thing that seems to be stopping her being a total Wonder Girl is the fact that she doesn't want to be it. Because if she ever wants to be a superhero, and she has the ability to generate energy, if she can completely recharge Black Lightning in one thing. I know she was a bit knackered, but not for very long. She didn't even have to eat or sleep or anything to get that strength back. She just said, can I sit down for a moment? And that sit down was only long enough for them all to get motivated again. So she's the danger one, where in Series 2 she could suddenly become as powerful as the sun. But at the moment, with Thunder and Black Lightning, they've kept them at the same level as the bad guys, and they've kept the powers consistent between scene to scene. Nobody can suddenly do anything. So it's funny you brought it up, and I was completely stunned by the question. But I think that's because I didn't see any trouble with it. I wasn't looking out for it, and it didn't slap me in the face. So I'm hoping that means that it was set to a good power level. Yeah.
For a lot of TV shows, it's normally a very slow power creep as well. I mean, this is only the first season, but what you normally find is in season 2 they make the villain more powerful, and therefore they've got to make the hero more powerful, and they slowly add stuff in where you're going, well, this is just getting bonkers now. The levels are just, world-ending power levels on both sides.
Well, you have the Flash where he's fast enough to stop time and then run fast while time is stopped. So, there is no combating that. In this, it's actually, I think Jeff's powers will get weaker as time goes on, because they've already established that you don't heal as quickly as you used to, you don't hold a charge as well as you used to. He is getting older, and I think Tobias will be the same. I mean, he takes a serious hit from Jeff, and he's out of commission for half a season, pretty much. So I don't think there's any danger of moving their power levels up too far, because, as I said, Jeff gets older every year. So if anything, his powers will become less reliable as he gets older.
I don't think the risk is them increasing Tobias's power levels. I think it's more the fact that he's escaped with the glowing briefcase, and that anything, something that he creates will be a power creep. I mean, you see what they do to Khalil. At the end, it's like, not only can he now walk, he can now jump great heights, he's incredibly strong, and he can fire poison arrow darts from his arms using this particular tool. That's the kind of thing we're like, okay, where the hell did all that come from? That was that was a hell of a starter kit they gave him. They've not just made him walk again, they've made him this. So that's where potential power creep comes in the next season, but you hope that, they sort of keep to their beginnings and they've managed to avoid a lot of the pitfalls that you normally get. Yeah. So you'd hope that they managed to swerve that.
Well, I think with Jennifer, as you say, they do have to watch with that. But the thing is, I mean, they just have her do things that are important for that episode or for that scene or whatever. So, I think this second season will be about defining her abilities. And the fact is, she's still young, so she is going to get more powerful before she gets less powerful. So there is that. Although they'll take time and define it, I think. I think that'll be fine. The Khalil thing, I think the limitation to that was that he had given up his own agency, his own freedom for all that stuff. The legs for loyalty thing that Tobias said, that was quite a powerful little statement, because it just shows, and it just shows that Tobias is in control, and Khalil regrets that because he realizes that he can't go home anymore, he can't go back to school, his relationship with Jennifer is over because Tobias now calls the shots, and I guess that's the limitation of his power, I suppose. A more spiritual limitation rather than a physical limitation, but still. So yeah, good stuff with the powers. I like that Jeff absorbs like electricity from stuff around him, like lights and things. That's quite cool. Just the little touches that make it, alright, so that's how that works. And, they do it without telling you how it works as well. It just...
it's kind of a natural way of adding quite nice, or quite good atmos to different scenes as well.
Yeah. Oh, look, Jeff is powering up and hiding himself. Mm-hmm. Or he's the only neon light in the corner where it's just completely dark.
When all the other lights go out, what's that bright light that's running towards you to punch you in the face? Oh, great. Yeah. Okay, now I know what it is.
It's quite effective, yeah. So, next season, there is going to be a season 2. I don't know how many episodes. I hope 13. I don't want a 23-episode season because I'm sick of them. On the other shows, they do not need 23 episodes. Legends got away with, was it 18? That was fine. But 23 is too many. 13, nice. Lets the story tick along. So that's what I'm hoping for. Will you guys still be watching season 2?
I think so, definitely. Yeah, I definitely will watch.
I am going to watch it. I think that for me, it was a shame Black Lightning has come at the end of a series of superhero shows. There's what, 4 DC, 5 DC? Have I got Constantine? How many more were there beforehand? At least 5.
Yeah, it depends what you define as... I'm guessing you're meaning the kind of post-Arrow renaissance.
So DC had Arrow, Flash, Constantine, Supergirl before, all coming in before Black Lightning.
And Legends, don't forget.
Legends as well. Is that 6 or whatever? Yeah. And then, so Marvel has had...
was a different network, but, yeah.
Yeah, whatever.
Same universe now, though.
Marvel had got, 4 and then into Defenders. So this is like the at least 10th superhero show that I've tried, And I think I've said before that I'm more of a science fiction fan than I am superhero, but that doesn't mean I don't have an interest in this. But again, that just makes it's a shame like this is the 10th one, because the interesting stuff for me was how it was a bit more grounded in reality and it was trying to tackle contemporary issues, but it's still the 10th superhero show I've watched. That by itself hasn't made it really stick out from the others completely. It does make this show considerably different from the other DC shows. I can't deny that. All the other DC shows are about having fun, having a laugh. And so this one's still fun. It still has that moments to it. It still has that kick-ass stuff in it, but it's definitely different. But unfortunately, is it that different from the serious milieu of stuff that's out there now? It's going to be one that has stayed on my watch list, but it's not at the top. And I think that probably would be unfortunately different if it had been, one of the earlier ones, and they'd have done, right, let's have a fun show like Flash, and then let's have a serious show like Black Lightning. I think I'd have been really into it then, but there's this thing in the back of my mind slowly growing and taking over my attention, and that is Legion. Almost literally doing that. And Legion is really stuck out as, okay, so you've watched 10 superhero shows, have you? Well, we've got something you've not seen before, and they are absolutely right. Whereas with Black Lightning, it's like, we've got something that is a bit different to what you've seen before, and you're totally right, but it's not a slap in the face enough to make me say, there's at least 100,000 shows out there now, all competing for my attention, and I'm having to get really brutal with my cutting as to what I'm actually going to watch. I think Black Lightning is in there because it's relevant, but if it ever goes the same way as the other DC shows and becomes just this danger of being just like the other ones, I think I might accidentally not watch it once and then maybe not catch up. I think there's a danger of that. I hope it carries on, and I hope it steps up some of that maybe a bit of a problem towards the finale at the end. I think they need to take what they've got and really focus on it. You know, like Legends did. Legends said, what are we really? Let's embrace that for season 2 and really hit it hard. Because I'm sure it's Craig, at least if not both of you, said that you thought season 2 was a really good thing for Legends. They really hit a greater stride. I think I want the same from Black Lightning to really. It's caught my interest, but to really grab me, I want it to do the same thing. Take what it is and really make it more so.
Yeah, it seems fair. I think I can see why it would be similar to the other shows. I mean, I've compared it to Flash, Arrow, and Legends repeatedly on this very podcast, and I think that comparison's unavoidable because they're all on the same network. They are about superheroes, and they have their different setups and stuff, but broadly speaking, they're shows about superheroes trying to do something. And I think I was surprised that the show wasn't darker than it is.
Yeah,
definitely. And I'm glad it isn't, though, because I'm personally fed up of this kind of dark and gritty stuff that they keep, that Christopher Nolan has unwittingly inspired people to think is the only thing that people want, because it just isn't, and
or is it?
Well, things like the Marvel Cinematic Universe prove that it's, that people are looking for a bit of fun from superheroes.
Well, I get that, but I was cheekily saying that I'm totally still on board, that's all.
Yeah.
It's not like I don't want that to go away, because if all the superhero shows were like Flash, then I would have to not watch any of them.
Well, if they were all like Flash, it'd be annoying. That's the thing, and I get enough difference out of each of them. Supergirl's tone is different to Flash, although it's more closely linked to Flash's tone. And the thing is, Arrow, certainly in its first season, was a much darker show than this is. I guess Arrow has moved away from the darkness, although it brings it back occasionally. It flips back and forth because it is one of the kind of core tenets of that show. But this one, it's not afraid to be kind of a bit jaunty sometimes. It takes everything very seriously. The social issues are all serious problems. They're treated with the gravity they deserve. But also you have Black Lightning making snarky comments as he's beating people with some kind of hip hop soundtrack backing him up. And I suppose it's a bit like Luke Cage in that sense, because Luke Cage did that. Not to compare the two shows about black superheroes, in that way, but the use of music was very similar.
Well, I think it isn't. It is actually a point that it does bear some analysis, because both shows had the same design. They both said, let's put aside middle-class white America and let's do something different. I think that in itself obviously is socially laudable, but it doesn't help the genre completely, because it's only Legion that's gone and said, let's do something completely different. And don't think that I believe you have to go totally nuts to be different. There are going to be other ways of being different. But they've both done a very specific thing, of Luke Cage and Black Lightning, which is important for today, and I think that's what has made them interesting to start with. I think both of them held their own after that initial point. They weren't just interesting from a contemporary point of view, they were interesting enough by themselves. But it's very noticeable that that's what the industry has decided to do. We need to tackle this problem of the day. And that's how they've chosen to make these shows stand out. I do when we first talked about Black Lightning, I had this thing in my mind that I was wondering if there was a middle ground which I think is still actually a valid question. Your other DC shows, every single one of them is white middle class America, whereas this DC show, Black Lightning, is very much Black America. Nobody yet, I think, has said, can we try and go into the future and create a universe that has managed to find the social balance that we desire? I mean, you've got like Star Trek, of course, that wanted to show that it had done that. You know, Star Trek was trying to say the Federation has found this perfect paradise, but you knew that was just them painting the cast. They were still very much, Star Trek episodes were still very much of their time when people were finding their feet socially in that sense. So I'm still interested in somebody trying to say, let's go 10 years into the future, or do an alt-verse and say these issues have been defeated, and they could still be socially responsible because they could tell you how they were defeated. This is what our world has become, and we've got other problems instead. I'd be quite interested in somebody trying to do that. I don't know where the conflict would come from, of course, because then you'd have to have something else going on in the background. But it would be interesting. It's interesting to note from a social perspective that we are still having to try and right wrongs by really pulling up individual areas. We're still not being able to agree, perhaps even amongst ourselves, what the final end point of this social change is going to be.
Yeah, and I suppose it's about looking at these issues through a particular lens, you know, the lens of, what if there was a guy with powers fighting for these people?
Yeah.
And, you know, that's kind of, I mean, that's why superheroes became popular in the first place. You know,
Yeah.
people were inspired during the war or the Great Depression with Superman, you know, because he was a bit of hope and so on. You know, if you look at all the popular superheroes, they answer a need. You know, Spider-Man answered a need for teenagers' problems to be considered relevant. You know, that kind of stuff. And yeah, there are no answers to the problem, but what you do is you focus on these characters who are struggling with these issues, and they don't always get it right. They don't always win, but they keep going, and I guess that's enough to inspire people. That's why these things in the end are popular.
Well, they're important with it. They're definitely.
Yeah.
All these shows are definitely important. We need to bring up all these other angles so we can stand some chance of becoming a singular, developed, hopefully wise society.
And you have that representation angle as well. You know, I mean, us as, well, the white middle class people have had representation coming out their ears for decades, and we're just now getting to this point where there's these alternate forms of it. You know, Wonder Woman spoke to people as a film because it was a female-led superhero film that was watchable. You know, and Black Lightning answers a need because there will be people that see themselves in these characters, and the fact that they've got such a wide range of characters, you know, ranging from teenage to middle age, it gives you that range, you know, and people can just look at it and see themselves in it. And I think the reaction to Thunder as a superhero is a big part of that. It's, you know, a lot of young women can look up to her because she is a woman who is fighting for them, you know, that kind of thing. So there are all sorts. I mean, I can't speak for representation in detail because in these particular groups, because I'm not a member of that group, you know, and but I can understand why people would respond to it.
Well, yeah, you don't need to be a member of a group to know that they're not represented. You don't need to be a member of a group to know that they would want to be represented. I mean, you can easily say, well, if I had no representation whatsoever, would I feel good if I suddenly did? Well, yeah, you know, I think you can easily put yourself in that.
Yeah. I mean, look at how much money Black Panther made at the box office. You know, that tells you exactly what you need to know about the need for representation in media.
Well, it makes me wonder then if the next shows, are they going to get into some sort of line then now whereby we're going to get other representative groups? I mean, so Supergirl have done a strong female role, Black Lightning gives you a strong black role, they've actually done male and female.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if people are going to chase more groups to try and raise up. That could be quite cynical, actually, if people suddenly do that and make money out of it. I'm not sure if that would automatically go the right way, if that would automatically go the wrong way, actually. That has as many potentially pitfalls as it would be good.
Yeah, although if you
I
get...
don't know where they're going to go from
people,
here.
If you get people involved that have an opinion about this sort of stuff and they're been looking to tell these stories, then... I mean, obviously, the reason that you let these shows on the air in the first place is because you want to make money out of them. You know, you're not... social conscience isn't the reason these shows get put on the air. It just isn't. It's... I hope someone will watch this, and therefore we will make money. That's why it's on the air in the first place. But the idea is, if we can put it on the air, make money, and people can watch it and get something new out of it, you know, see themselves up there and when they couldn't before, then everybody wins, I suppose.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, modern representative capitalism. Absolutely.
Yeah, fine. Yeah, it's an interesting point. And I suppose it's not one that we as three white males in the UK can argue to any real degree of expertise. But
just because you say it, I think it's. I wouldn't. Yeah, I don't think I'd threaten yourself like that so much. I think it's one that you shouldn't be strayed away from in terms of. You're in this potential danger of saying, "Oh, yeah, this is a show that is to represent black people. Therefore, black people should be the ones to talk about it." You're almost in danger of creating the same problem from the opposite angle. Actually, I think it's quite important that we do comment on it and we do see that we have a connection to it. So we are actually bringing it into our society. Yeah. So there is an angle that is unique to that specific audience. That's the emotional angle, but there shouldn't be any, and we should be encouraged to try and bring it into our own societies and talks as well. So I don't think you should worry too much about not being able to cover every angle.
Yeah, I think our argument is very kind of contained into a certain area because there are certain parts of it that we can't understand. But here's the thing: we three could watch this show, we could enjoy this show, we could get something out of it, we could understand what it was going for. So therefore, it is a show for all audiences in that aspect. Yes. You know, it is a show about a superhero. It's got engaging characters. I understand that representation is a big part of it because I live in the world and read about these things, and you see on Twitter what people want and what people are happy about or whatever, and then you can sort of see why this show that I enjoy is actually more than just a TV show. It's more than the sum of its parts. And it's more than just simple entertainment. And that's good. Season 2, though. Chris, what would you like for Season 2? I think me and Aaron are in agreement. Kind of focus on what they were good at and give us more of it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think this lays a very good foundation. It sets up quite a lot. I mean, in the season finale, it doesn't really close a lot of doors. It opens more, if anything. So, yeah, I just look forward to seeing how they develop with it. They've built a nice, strong foundation, so let's hope that they build on that. I agree with you about the size of the season. You don't want them to suddenly turn around and do 20-odd episode season. I think stick to the 13. Do some proper, powerful storytelling, and it'll go far.
Yeah, agreed. So, I think we've pretty much covered everything that we can without just going into a bizarre tailspin of minutiae. I watched the show weekly, and I saw the finale a few weeks ago, and my memory of the little bits and pieces is pretty good, actually. Sometimes I tend to forget some of the smaller elements, like, I would have expected to forget maybe Jeff talking to his enemies before beating them up, but it's something that shone through, so that's cool. So just kind of as a final thought, I mean, what did you think of the show? What did you think of the show as a whole, and has our discussion just kind of changed that perception in any way, I suppose?
No, I still enjoyed it. Like I say, I found there was a little lull in the middle for me where there was a few sort of. Don't get me wrong, the payoff for these episodes where they sort of set up quite a lot of stuff is that you get a couple of really cracking episodes where it all comes to the fore. But overall, I really enjoyed it. I mean, there's so much on telly now, it's difficult to choose what to watch, but I really did enjoy it.
Yeah, I think
it was one of those.
If superheroes are in it, I'll tend to watch it.
Yeah, I mean, my thing with this is the same with a lot of others, is that I'll start watching another thing and sort of churn through a few episodes and build up a couple and then come back. And, it was on Netflix here in the UK, so it was one of those ones where you could go away for a few weeks and then come back and watch a couple of episodes. And, the only trick is avoiding spoilers, but, thankfully my friends are rather gracious that way and don't spoil things too often.
Yeah, well, I don't know how many friends you would have that were watching it, but, the only people I knew that were watching it were you guys. So, no chance of it being spoiled because I was ahead of you all the time. Yeah.
I've had one guy at my work that's been desperate to talk to me about it for about the last 3 weeks when he found out that I watched it.
Yeah. Cool. Aaron, your kind of final thoughts. Do you, has our discussion changed your perception in any way, or are you still kind of feeling the same about it?
I think my big change came when we did the chat of season 1, when Chris pointed out how much of a Bond villain Tobias was. And then once I'd had my eyes open to the fact that there were these other things I'd not quite seen, from then on I think my opinions of it were probably consistent all the way through. I feel like I've been talking quite negatively throughout all of this, but I've only been trying to offer a bit of counterpoint. So to finish on, I'd probably say that I did enjoy this. I did actually want to see the next episode, and I did find it to be an enjoyable show. The criticisms that I've possibly been levelling at the show could, however, have been summarised by them having so many ideas that they've tried to put all of them in, and maybe they didn't all get enough room to breathe. However, that doesn't mean that any of the ideas were necessarily bad ones. It is just that timing issue. So overall, I did enjoy the show. As I say, I just wish it'd come up a bit early, because then it wouldn't have been suffering superhero fatigue, and some of the surprises and some of the fun scenes that were coming in, some of the jokes and everything. I would have come to it a bit fresher. I probably would have enjoyed it a little bit more because of that. But despite that, I mean, I didn't dislike it for that reason. I still enjoyed it, and it's just the nature of the age. My age. There we go.
Fair enough. Yep, my final thought is I really liked this show. It gave me something that other superhero shows don't. I was really enjoying all the kind of social commentary it was bringing. And I think our discussion has just kind of helped me realise in more detail the things I really, really liked about it. As I was writing about it over the course of the season, I got really bogged down in certain elements of it. Every week it would make me think about something very specific, and it's just bringing that up through this discussion has kind of made me appreciate it even more. And I think maybe during the summer, or certainly before season 2 begins, I might just watch through this season again, just to, because if I'm watching something for an analytical purpose, as in to review it right afterwards, it's different as I look at it differently. But if I'm just watching it to just enjoy it, it'll be different, and I think it'll speak to me differently if I just kind of watch it one episode a day for a couple of weeks in a couple of months' time. I don't know. It's just a good show. It just is, and it's good characters, and it's well written, and it's well thought out. So I can't wait to see more of it, essentially. So that's that. So unless you guys have anything else, I think we should call it quits. Put the dynamo back in the box, go and hide in a school somewhere. I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing with this metaphor, but... But yeah, anything else from anyone else?
I got nothing, and I can't help you with that metaphor, so I have to leave that to Chris.
I also have no idea why you're wanting to hide in a school, so I'm going to leave you to drown in your own metaphor.
Because it's safe. You know, it's a safe place.
I'm sorry, but I saw the school get attacked a lot. Where you want to hide is in the tailors. Just saying.
Fair enough. Yeah. I suppose he has a secret bunker and stuff.
Yeah. The school got attacked a lot. The tailors got left alone.
Yeah, apart from once.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for joining for this podcast. Aaron, well done for not stopping watching it and keeping up to date-ish. Chris, absolute mammoth effort binging it over the past couple of weeks. Now you can look forward to loads of episodes of The Flash that are really underwhelming. So look at you.
Great! Thanks, boss.
And we'll have a Flash podcast in a couple of weeks. So that'll be fun. Yay!
So you started with a low bar and now you're finishing on a low bar. Yeah, that's good. I like that.
Yeah. Keep it low. Keep it easy. Yeah. So, Chris, as always, thank you for appearing.
Thank you.
Aaron, thank you for appearing.
Bye-bye.
That was our discussion of Black Lightning Season 1. As always, if you like what you heard, then hit that subscribe button on iTunes, YouTube, or any major podcasting app. If you could leave some 5-star reviews, or even 1-star reviews, or something in between, on iTunes, that'd be great, so we can see how well we're doing. We hope you'll join us on the next Kneel Before Pod.